So essentially, when you are studying in the US, particularly when you're going for higher education, you look at college education or university education, and there are four kinds of programs, broadly speaking, that are available in the US. One is the associate degree. This is something you do after high school. Another is the bachelor's degree, again after high school, and master's and doctoral, which is pretty self-explanatory. But what you need to, what is slightly tricky to understand is what is the associate degree. Now, these generally tend to be two-year programs and more vocational and are generally offered by community colleges which are open enrollment. So really getting into those programs is not very competitive. More or less everybody who applies makes it into the associate degree program. Uh, the bachelor's degree in the US is slightly different, and as compared to those that are available in, say, the US or UK or Australia. And what is essentially different about the US is that in India, if you get into an engineering program, say for example, then all you do for the 4 years that you study engineering is you study engineering. Whereas in the US, if you get into an engineering program in the first year, you would also study other areas like languages and social sciences and general sciences. And so you would have a rather broader base in terms of the education. Even if you were studying psychology, say for example, in a bachelor's degree program in the US, you would find that you would have to study some amount of math and some amount of language and some amount of other sciences. And this kind of gives you a wider base. It also, what is special about that bachelor's degree is while you may have thought that I want to do engineering, you can go because the first year is such a common year and you can do various things. You may be able to shift in the second year more easily than if you were to do it in a program in India, which is very set that if you're doing BA economics, that's what you're doing. The other wonderful thing is that you can simultaneously at the bachelor's level in the US do a couple of majors. So I could be majoring in, say, civil engineering or pharmaceutical sciences, and simultaneously I could also be studying economics or business. And that is special and really something unique to the US education system. Uh, what's different in terms of the master's and doctoral degrees, how they differ as compared to what is unique, what is different as compared to the standardized education available here in India. One is at the master's level, particularly when you're studying technology, you of course get cutting edge because US tends to be the originator of most technologies, whether it's biological sciences, environmental sciences, the engineering aspects, or pharmaceutical sciences. Even a lot of the business, programs are really leaders in terms of pedagogy, and most of the excellent programs here are modeled after, for example, IIM Ahmedabad. The year that it was set up, the entire faculty was sent to Harvard to do a teacher's training program, and so the system is basically modeled after in the Harvard Business School program. And at the doctoral level, rather than register under a guide and do a PhD on your own and then submit a report, or intermittent periods meet the guide, you actually are at university and you have to take classes at university and you have to research in the lab at the university. even if it's a degree in psychology or a degree in operations research, which is a business school degree, you are still in the university, attending classes, attending, you know, being there all day. So that is kind of unique about the master's and doctoral programs in the US. In terms of the institutions that offer these various programs, the associate degree or the bachelor's or master's or doctoral degrees, what are the basic kind of types of institutions? Well, you have the private universities. These are universities that do not have public funding. So the state is not involved in the management or the funding of those. So, for example, Harvard is a private university. Columbia is a private university. Stanford is a private university. Uh, Public universities, on the other hand. Now, private universities are not necessarily for profit. So Harvard is a not-for-profit university. Stanford is the same way. But they're just not funded by the state or the federal government. They're not funded in any way. They're not dependent for their funding on those agencies. Public universities, on the other hand, have public funding. So they're either funded by the federal government or generally the state government. And universities tend to offer, whether they're private or public, bachelor's programs, master's programs, and doctoral programs generally. Now there can be exceptions to the rule, but generally universities tend to offer the entire range of programs that is there. There is something unique called liberal arts colleges in the US. And these are essentially four-year colleges, so they tend not to offer master's and doctoral programs. And these give a more liberal education. So you have much more flexibility and much more variety available in terms of what you can take up in programs and in subjects. And even in the second and third year, you needn't get boxed into, say, engineering or chemistry or biology or business or economics, or you don't get boxed in. If you want, you can, but you can have complete flexibility. Some of the liberal arts colleges also tend to be smaller in terms of the number of students that they enroll. Liberal arts colleges class size also tends to be smaller, so there is a lot more personalized feeling when you attend a liberal arts college, for example. On the other hand, community colleges would are very, very easy to make into. They're also much cheaper to go to than the liberal arts colleges or the public or private institutions. And admissions norms are less stringent as compared to other schools. Of course, you would have public and private universities also, which are very easy to get admitted to. That, in a nutshell, is kind of all of the basic introduction that I wanted to give all of you who are listening to this in terms of the educational system. And what I'd like to do is I'd like to take any questions that we may have on the basic education system before we move ahead to understand how we can get into a dream institution, because really, finally, when it comes to studying in the US, what you want to do is get into a dream institution. So any questions on the basic education system? So we have a question here which says, are private universities extremely costly in general and offer no scholarships for masters? Do public universities offer better prospects than others? I am trying to expand this and read this better so that I can uh, not necessary. It's not necessary that private universities are always more expensive than public universities. And sometimes public universities can be less giving of their money because they are more attuned to giving money to state residents than to international students, whereas private universities do not necessarily have their hands tied that they have to award money only to citizens or state residents. So that may not necessarily be true. It depends from university to university, and within the university also, depends from school to school. So as far as the system goes, I think those were the questions. The other questions, uh, so community colleges don't offer master's degree programs, and neither do liberal arts colleges. There was a question from Madhav and Steve Nikambulla. And community colleges don't offer master's programs. Liberal arts colleges also generally don't offer master's programs. So those are only at university systems, and different universities offer different kind of scholarships depending on the program. So quickly, before we go into the nitty-gritties of the masters, a question. There are questions. Oh, no, I want to increase the size of it. So a dream institution would not necessarily be decided by what is public or what is private. When you look at a dream institution, how you would how you would do it is very important, and only once you are absolutely certain that this is the right one for me would you go ahead and make applications, and whether to look at private or public is something that we will get to. Ideally, you know, a, a, a dream institution is something that will fulfill all of your dreams naturally. And generally, when we have dreams, what we are looking at is of course the swanky car and the big house by the beach, of course. Uh, And here's what I think about dreams. I think that it's extremely possible to achieve whatever castle in the air you have built, but but it's very essential, uh, to put a foundation under your dream. So castles that you want to build and castles that you want to own and reign over should be in the air, because after all that is where castles are meant to be. But you have to put a solid foundation under them. And that foundation is, general perception is that all that this foundation really uh, looks at or works on or caters to is what are the exam scores. Uh, you know, and certainly you, depending on the program that you want to study, your entrance exam scores matter. If you want to look at the MBA, the GMAT or the GRE, depending on the institution. If you're looking at master's MS programs, then you want to take the GRE. If you also want to take the test of English as a foreign language to ensure the university that you have the requisite English speaking skills and understanding skills. And if you are an undergraduate student, you would also want to look at instead of the GMAT or the GRE, you would be looking at the SAT. But this is only something everybody, even if you are an American citizen born and brought up in the US, you have to take the entrance exams. You don't have to take the test of English, but the entrance exams you do have to take. Whether it's the GMAT or the GRE or the SAT. So while we perceive that this is the only thing that matters, the players, the people who take admissions, who make admissions decisions, are one, the admissions office. It may be the graduate office or the undergraduate admission office. And when it comes to masters and doctoral programs, it also is the department and the professors within the department. So understanding that these are decision makers, you then have to kind of plan on what all, understand what they look for, and then plan so that you meet more than their expectation. So what do they look for when admissions decisions are made? They most certainly look at our academic background. So, for example, if we are applying to master's programs, then they will look at our undergraduate scores, which is bachelor's degree performance. If we are looking at bachelor's degree programs, they will look at our school scores, and they will look at 9th, 10th, 11th, and whatever is available of the 12th grade. They will also look at our test scores, so our GMAT, GRE, SAT, TOEFL, IELTS, whatever is applicable. But as I said, everybody has to take the exams, the scores. Everybody has to send academic transcripts. How then do we decide to differentiate when you are admitting a student? And that is where everything else that you have done in order to build your resume, in order to build your foundation matters. So the other aspects that are very closely looked at are the other activities that you have undertaken. Co-curricular activities, so projects and seminars and models, publications, any awards that you have got for curriculum related activities certainly make a big difference. Additionally, and depending on the program, this is different, but extracurricular activities. For example, an engineer who wants to go for an MBA or information technology or computer engineer who is considering MIS, then they would also look at things like, were you part of the IEEE chapter at your college? Did you take up any leadership roles? Did you engage yourself in other opportunities like say you have a community service organization, say YUVA has a chapter in your college or your school. Did you take part in that? Have you on a sustained basis maintained another extracurricular activity? Maybe a sport, maybe an art, maybe something that you have done on the communications side. Like, for example, you're a very, very active MUNR, which is a Model United Nations participant. You do more than 5 conferences in a year. Then all of that gets put together to decide whether or not you would be admitted. So it's very, very important to well in advance think that what is it that I would like to study, and what are the qualities and the activities that would facet my personality in order to make me a better candidate for that particular program. And then you make that plan, and then you go around actually preparing yourself so that you become eligible for the program that you are very, very interested in your dream school. So there are 2 things you do. One is you prepare yourself before you actually begin applications. And the second thing that you do, which is extremely important, is the admission process itself. So what do we mean by preparing ourselves, pre-admission? It's about putting in effort. I think you're never given a wish without being given the power to make it come true. You just have to put in enough effort to get it done. So, and effort is not just academics. Effort is not just your scores. Effort is a lot more. Okay, is a lot more. Everybody can put in scores and academic. Everybody has to put in that. You have to differentiate yourself. You need that extra edge. And your job as a student is to ensure that the 2 years before you actually make applications, or even if you've already made applications, you add activities which will make you a better candidate. So what could you do? Say you are even if you are in high school, even if you are in college, how would you build? Every institution that is admitting students would like to gauge, would like to assess what is the level of interest in his or her field that this particular student has. So there are tons of technical festivals happening. There are a lot of seminars and expert lectures that are happening. So one basic thing that one could do is actually attend a lot of seminars and expert lectures and build awareness about the various options within one's field. Once that is done, then another thing to do would be to present seminars. You start with your college, go to technical festivals in your college, and then move on to other technical festivals. You try and see if there are conferences which are attended by professionals and academicians where you can make a presentation. And it's very important that you get into the network. You get network so that you are aware that this festival is happening here or that is happening there. Being member of, say, the Computer Society of India, of IEEE, of the Pharmaceutical Society, in your area you would find out. Being a member of ISAC, if you are a economics, a management, a business, a commerce student, even if you are an electrical engineering student or any engineering student, being a member of ISAC would give you an understanding of what are the opportunities that are available out there where I can engage in more than just my 4 years of studies or my 3 years of study, depending on the program you are in, or in only my school studies. And you would ensure that you take steps in the, if you're not sure what you want to study, what you would do is you would explore several things that you're interested in to get clarity on whether you like something or not, and in the process to build your resume. You know, there are between semesters, there are vacations, between school years, there are vacations, and they are substantially long. So if you do a 2-week internship, and nobody is going to come and offer you this particular job, uh, but if you think, okay, I'm interested in advertising, or I'm interested in telecom, or I'm interested in pharmaceutical manufacturing, how do I go about understanding it better? And you see, we're not saying the big companies will give you an internship, but even if you seek an internship in a smaller company and actually get something done, then that is something to add to your resume. That is something that will say, okay, here is a student who did more than what others are doing. Uh, Publications perhaps is the toughest to get done, but it's not impossible. We work with a load of students here at Disha who have actually gotten, by the time they're in the final year, have actually been a co-author, one of the many, but they have actually helped and worked on some research publication or some experimental publication, which has made a big difference to the resume. So that is something that one would also want to engage in. The other very important thing when you look for uh, what to do to build your resume, which is you ensure that you have built rapport with teachers in school or professors in college, because recommendation letters are a very important time to very important element, and must be timed right and worded right in order to help your admissions process. You also want to ensure that you have done a really, really good job with shortlisting the right institutions where you want to apply. And then you want to ensure that the essays are also very, very strong. The How do you actually go about deciding uh, which universities to shortlist for the programs that you are considering? I think primarily there are three very, very important things that you must consider, and this was a question that Navjot had. Uh, is is what how good is the university academically, and not just in terms of the university, but your department and the program that you want to go into. That is something that you absolutely must check. The second thing that you absolutely must check is practical considerations, and we want to discuss that. And the last and not the least is, what are your chances of making into this particular university? So when we talk about academic quality, uh, what exactly do we include when we assess academic quality? And generally speaking, you absolutely must check that the institution that you are applying to is accredited. Uh, for example, engineering institutions are accredited by ABET in the United States. ABET, it's an acronym. Um, Business schools are accredited by ASCSB, so that is also something that you want to kind of look at. You want to check that the university is, or the institution is really strong in your area of interest, and how you check that is something we want to discuss. Most of you tend to check only the rankings. The rankings as a standalone factor in checking uh, your your area of interest and the quality of the school may not quite be the right way of doing it. It may be one of the factors, it can't be the only factor. Then professors in your department and the kind of research uh, projects that are happening. When you check rankings, you absolutely must check that who is actually doing it. So for example, very popular ranking gets done, and I'm not going to name any ranking, but it gets done, and nobody verifies that information, and that is the most popular ranking that you use. And they don't rank institutions that don't offer doctoral programs. So some excellent programs don't get ranked because they don't offer any doctoral degree programs, and that is not right. You want to check who was sampled, how many people actually gave their opinion when this rankings was created, and how old is this ranking, what has changed when this ranking was done. What I'm explaining to you is ranking alone cannot be a reason to go or not to go to a university. It can be one of the elements you consider, but not the only one. And with a lot of students, most of students, I find that because that is the only assurance that you have in terms of the quality of the institution, you tend to look at only rankings, and that may not be a very wise thing to do. How can you check the quality of the academic institution? So you look at, within your department, within your program, you look at the professors, you look at their background, you look at, how much work they have accomplished in their careers in terms of the areas that you're interested in. You look at how many people, how many professors are actually working. Say you're interested in networking, or someone is interested in embedded systems, or someone else is interested in sustainability or structural engineering. How many professors in the department working in that area? What are their backgrounds? How much, how current is the research that they're doing? And that will kind of give you an understanding of the commitment to your area, which is a good way of assessing whether or not you will get a good education. Yes, you look at the library, but that's not the only thing that you would look at. You would also look at what kind of internships were available to students. And now with social networking websites, it's very easy to do. You would look at who has given grants for research to this department and university. What is the amount of funding that is available to my department and funding? And maybe you will not get this funding, but when you look at the people who are placing faith in the department or the university, you get a sense of how good or how advanced that particular institution is in whatever you want to pursue. So it's not about whether you will get this money or not. It's about whether others trust this university, this institution, this department with their money to take the area ahead. We're assessing this for the academic quality of the institutions that we are applying to. And so this is how you would look at it. Then grants and corporate tie-ups. You would find there are several universities in technology, in the sciences, even in business, where they have a consistent, sometimes decades old relationship with large corporate bodies who give them entire labs. So for example, Intel would give an entire lab to a particular California State University for VLSI, where they would give them a fabrication unit, where they would update all of the software and all of the available equipment and lab, so that if you go to that university, you would come out with cutting edge knowledge. That's a corporate tie-up. Cisco or Sun or Xilinx or Cadence have tie-ups with several universities, which will tell you that in my area, these are the top-notch companies, and they have, on a consistent basis, given labs and donated equipments, which means that they like the quality of academics that is offered over here. And that is how you would check that aspect of academic quality. Another thing that you would, of course, check after you check academic quality when you're selecting an institution is what are the kind of opportunities, more practical consideration. Is it advisable to go to a school in the middle of nowhere, which may be in Idaho or Alaska, or should I choose a university which has a better location? And that is not always a very black or white answer. There are various elements to it, and you want to understand that when you choose a university. Of course, cost would be a consideration, but just pure cost may not be a consideration. You may want to consider value for money, and we want to discuss that in a bit more detail. And then the environment. The academic environment can be different from university to university, and making it into a university and surviving and thriving in a university are two completely different things. And you need to be aware of that when you're actually making a decision to choose a university. So, what do we mean by opportunities? You would look at, what per se are the opportunities that the university generates? Does it have a very strong placement services cell? Are internships very easily available? Is the program, sometimes you have programs that are co-op programs in the US, and co-op tend to be internships that are interwoven into the curriculum of the program, bachelor's or master's. So those are university-generated opportunities that you would have. Then you would look at location area opportunities. So if you were interested in say, petroleum engineering, then you want to look at Texas and Louisiana, where all of the petroleum is. If you were interested on the hardware side of electronics, like VLSI, then you would look at Texas, because that's where the top 5 circuit companies have their headquarters. On the other hand, if you want to look at pharmaceutical industry, you would need to go up north in the Northeast, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, which is where that industry is located. If you wanted to look at, information technology or computer science, as it is termed in the US, then you certainly don't want to ignore the Silicon Valley. If you were looking at finance in the MBA or the business arena, then you need to look at New York and the big financial hubs like Chicago and San Francisco and Charlotte and Hartford and places like that. You would also, now everybody would look at, okay, lot of opportunities in Silicon Valley. Let's all go to Silicon Valley. What that does is, of course, and you would have to balance this, is it's very, very competitive in the Silicon Valley. So the number of opportunities need to be weighed with the kind of competition you have. And you would find that in some schools, schools means universities, there are more than 5,000 international students, and 80% of those are Indian and Chinese. Now, yes, it is located in an area that has a lot of opportunities, but will you be able to compete with 5,000 other Indian and Chinese students to get the opportunities that you want? That is something that you seriously need to look at. So opportunities is not just about location. It's not just about whether the university will help in my placements or not. It's not just about, okay, no competition here. You have to balance everything. It's very, very important that you're able to balance all aspects. Then, of course, you want to look at tuition. Now, tuitions, when you compare, you want to look at two things, particularly in master's degree programs. As I am looking at questions, it seems like most of you are master's students, so I'm going to talk more about masters. If there are any undergraduate students, they can pop up a question and we can take it later. You would look at, for my program, what are the number of credits that I need to take? And then you would look at the per credit tuition fee. And you would multiply the number of credits for a master's program with the per credit tuition fee and arrive at a comparable figure. Okay? What is a credit? Well, a credit is every program in the US is flexible. So if two people are doing electrical engineering, we could be taking completely different subjects and still both be able to get a master's in electrical engineering. So every subject, every course as it is called in the US, or subject, is denoted some credits. And in order to get a master's degree, you have to take a specific number of credits. Now, if I take all easy courses which are light in terms of the credit load, 1 credit, 2 credit, then I have to take that many more courses. So I have to study more number of courses. If you take a very, very heavy course, it might have 4 credits because it involves a lot of work, a lot of hours, a lot of commitment, a lot of hard work. And depending on the number of hours of engagement, that would be given some credit value. So your course may be worth 4 credits. Now I would have to take 2 courses of 2 credits to get 4 credits. And you would have to do just 1 course. But at the end of it, we will both have taken, say, 30 credits to get a master's degree. So a credit is the breakup which allows the US educational system to be so very flexible. So you would compare the per credit cost and the total number of credits. Some universities would have a very low per credit cost, but they would have a high number of credits needed. On the other hand, some universities may have a seemingly higher credit per credit cost, so they would need lesser number of credits. So you would have to compare what is needed for the master's degree. Second thing that you would do is you wouldn't look at just the figure that is given by the university on the website or given by the university on your I-20 if you've been admitted. You would actually research about what I told you, which is the credits and the cost. Because sometimes universities assume you will want to finish sooner and will assume that you will take more than 60-70% of your classes in the first year. So you would think, oh, too expensive, but really it's not that expensive. Another thing that you must look at is living costs. Now, there is something that I want to, a disclaimer that I want to put there. Is New York a very expensive city to live in? Yes. Is Boston a very expensive city to live in? Yes. Is, Birmingham less expensive? Most certainly. But what people do is when they live in New York, they don't live in prime locations. They live in more middle class areas, and New York has an excellent public transportation system. Sometimes people in the smaller cities, which are less expensive, live 3 in an apartment, and in the bigger cities they live 5 in an apartment. So when you consider cost, you cannot just, when a university tells you this is the cost, they will assume that you are a graduate student if you are a master's student and you will stay alone. You can't take that as a cost. You have to do your own work. You have to do your own understanding of really what is going to be the living cost. In my experience, generally, if you are not very extravagant, if you're a spendthrift, in today's day and age, anywhere between $500 to $600 should cover all of your living expenses, including your gas and including your, that's gas is heating and electricity and even your boarding and lodging. Okay? And sometimes one more thing that people consider when they're making applications is the cost of application. So some universities have prohibited application fees. The range can be as low as $25 and can go up to as high as $200 for an application. And you do want to consider that as well when you make a list of universities. A lot of people consider weather when making applications, and I think that's not a good thing to make a prime factor. It can be one of the factors, because I think it's cold in the United States. It has been snowing in Texas, which for the past 2 years. So you can't make the weather a reason to go or not to go. You may consider it as an added feature, but you really should not make that the only feature. You most certainly want to consider the kind of campus life you will have. So is there a community close by? And this is different. Some people want to be only with other Indian students. And some students want to have a truly international exposure. Some students want to be near a big city because they want to do other things on the weekend. And some people love the campus experience. Now, if you go to a big city school, say you go to Columbia, then, the campus is not a sprawling 5,000-10,000 acre campus, but it is a lot of buildings in downtown New York. But on the other hand, if you want a wonderful campus, you could go to a place like Purdue or Colorado State, and they have sprawling, beautiful campuses, but they're not close to big cities, or even Michigan, Ann Arbor. So you have to take a call, and you see, there is no right or wrong. You have to look at, what do I want, and then make a choice. And you must look at safety. There are some universities where location are such, and if you're not capable of looking after yourself, then you really, really need to kind of avoid those ones. And I think this is particularly important for undergraduate students. You must take into account safety, the campus safety and the safety of the area around the campus. Very, very important to look at that when you make applications. And then, of course, you must look at your chances, whether your scores. Getting minimum scores does not mean you have a good chance. Minimum is what they need, minimum. Okay, that doesn't make you eligible. Then academics, and then acceptance percentage is generally what you think is all that matters. That's not true. What I told you also matters is, your recommendation letters, your resume in terms of what other extra things you have done, which we already discussed, and the essays that you write. Finally, that also makes a big difference. The resume, the recommendation letters, and the essays are what are read by the department when they are making the decision. So those as well are very, very important. And all of that put together will get you into an institution which is your dream institution, which is the place that you were born to study in. And that is how you need to approach it. I think a very, very important thing is, people who make it into the good universities, a lot of people tend to say, oh, he's very lucky, or oh, she's very lucky. And I certainly believe that luck is very, very important when you're applying. And the kind of luck that I believe in is that he worked by day and toiled by night. He gave up play and some delight. Dry books he read, new things to learn, and forged ahead, success to earn. He plodded on with faith and pluck, and when he won, men called it luck. In my experience, over the years, over these many years working with thousands of students, I find that what matters most is the quantum of work that you have put in in order to get into your dream university? That is about all I had on essentially the system and of course how you go about choosing your universities and what you do to ensure that you make it into those universities. There seem to be a lot of questions, and I will try and answer these. Those which are very specific, I think I shouldn't take, but others I can take. So here's a question that Vanan had. Are private universities extremely costly in general and offer no scholarships? Not true. Private universities are not necessarily all expensive. They can be, but public universities, for example, University of California, Berkeley is a public university and it's extremely expensive, or UCLA or UCSD, so is University of Michigan Ann Arbor. It's a public school and very, very expensive. So private universities may not necessarily be more expensive than public. They could be, and no, private universities, in fact, state universities sometimes have their hands tied in terms of giving out scholarships to international students, while private don't. Another question we had here is, do public universities offer better prospects than others? Certainly not. I don't believe so. Depends on the school that you go to. If you go to a really good public university, then that's great. But if you get into Stanford, which is a private school, to study electrical or computer science, then I don't think there is a public university out there that can beat it. So that's not really the case. We did discuss what are credits hours. What are research assistantships? Well, this is a question that Sandy Madonna had, and a research assistantship is essentially when you are offered an opportunity to work as an assistant to someone who is doing research in a particular area. There are three types of assistantships. One is a teaching assistantship. So if you go as a master's student, you might be teaching undergraduate students some subject, and you would be very good in that subject, and that would get proven from your transcripts and your mark sheets and your scores. Or you might have done a lot of research work, and then you might get awarded a research assistantship. And the third kind is graduate assistantship, where you are basically doing administrative kind of work, helping with admissions, helping with answering phones and such other stuff. So, and generally assistantships are offered at the master's level, or doctoral level more so, particularly research assistantships, more so at the doctoral level. So only the universities really offer it. A question that we had here by Kumar Simant is technical support profile after engineering a relevant experience for MBA? Making it relevant is really something that would be part of your essays and your recommendation letters. But if you knew that you were looking at MBA in operations research, then the kind of work you would do, you would include stuff that would be giving extra inputs on how to better manage the services at the office, or how to have a better quick turnaround time in whatever service you're doing, or how to improve the systems so that the operations work much more efficiently. You want to kind of get some of those kind of things done and then make that part of your recommendation letter. So that's something that you would want to do. We did discuss, Navjot Singh had a question in terms of what would be the basic criteria for selecting a university, and I think we spent a good part, 20 minutes doing that. So there are some visa-related questions, and a question that Ms. Bhatt had is a student loan a liability for visa? Well, that depends on everything else. In the US visa, there isn't a standard way of looking at visa. It's individual based, and so the entire background would be have to study. But no, students, people who go into the visa office with student loans don't necessarily get refused a visa. So that's not the case. A question that Mr. Pradhan had is how many students are getting an internship or a campus job? There is no, what is the ratio? There is no standard ratio available that even a university, forget across universities or institutions, but within a university. But this much I can tell you, in the worst of times, which was 2008 and 9, when things were really, really slow after the big collapse of the US, even in those times, people who made effort found on-campus jobs. And this is about talking to more people, making friends other than Indians and Chinese, you know, interacting with people in the cafe, interacting with people in the library, going and not taking no for an answer, sending out 200 resumes. People have gotten jobs even in the worst of time, and even today people are getting jobs. So if you kind of work hard, then I think it is very, very possible. Sunika Gupta had a question saying, what are publications? Well, publications as well, you are part of a team in your, you know, with a professor at the institutions that you're studying in currently, and you actually have done research work which actually got published in, you know, a journal or a magazine, and your name was part of the authors. How do you look for internships? You send out resumes, you network, you with others who are in your class, with professors, with as many people as you can. You go to career fairs, you go to conventions, seminars, even in the US, which are related to your area. You meet people there, you take cards, and then you write to them. I'm looking at questions. One had a question, are rankings reliable? And I think I pretty much covered that as I talked about rankings. Mr. Pradhan had a question, if a university ranking will go up or down during study, will that affect my career? I don't believe that ranking should be something that you look at when you actually, only thing you look at when you actually choose a university. So even if that happens, I don't think that would matter, because that's not the only thing that you have looked at. And Navjot Singh had a question. Why do you have to show twice the amount of the I-20? There is no standard on what you have to show. It depends on the individual case in the visa. Is there a difference, Ms. Dani had a question, is there a difference between Master of Engineering and Master of Science? And yes, Master of Engineering tends not to have a thesis or a research work at the end. It tends to be either coursework based or project based, whereas an MS program would have a thesis or a research work at the end. How many months before we can apply for admission? What generally admissions open by August of the previous year for fall. And different universities have different deadlines. So for August of next year, some universities close in November, some in December, and some are open as late as June even. Anand, that was a question you had, and that's the answer to that one. How would one qualify to get a scholarship? Well, scholarship goes to the most qualified students. So what you would do is you would build yourself in every area, and then you would get qualified. What is important to note is that a lot of universities are not need blind. So applying the scholarships everywhere might end up in a situation where sometimes you might not get admission, because a university will feel, well, he's a good student, she's a good student, but we can't fund them. So let's give the opportunity to the person who has the money. So you cannot indiscriminately say, yes, give me scholarship here. You have to think it through. Okay, you have to think it through before making scholarship applications. Here's an interesting question by Mr. Kanade. Why do most of the Indian students have US as their dream destination when other destinations like Germany and Australia are cheaper? I think there are several reasons for that. One is that in terms of technology, US, whether it's the sciences or engineering or or business, the kind of opportunities that US offers post your graduation, after you finish your bachelor's or master's, are absolutely by far the best, even in the toughest of times. Australia just doesn't have enough happening. And in terms of Germany, while education is now being offered in Germany in English language, but Germans, organizations and internships, you need to speak really fluent German. And you may learn German, but your ability to assimilate into a German environment might be very, very different. So getting accepted and getting settled, I think, is a big deal. And while a lot of students are coming back from the US, when you go to study in a foreign country, you want the education and then you want at least a couple of years of work experience, because that completes the education. And I think that is the reason why US, which has had very clear policies that if you study, then we will give you a work opportunity. It has not changed that policy in several decades. And that consistency of policy and of opportunity is what makes US and now Canada the places to get your education in. No. Another question I had here was, would an I-20 amount include only tuition fee? No, it would include your lodging, boarding, and other expenses also. Mr. Pradhan had a question, can a student travel to other countries while on study? If you have a multiple entry visa, you can. You can travel to other places. A question that Mr. Agrawal has is that he has done his BTech in Electronics and Communication with a 77% aggregate, and he has been offered a place in Master in Computer System in University. Well, if you like the program, then it's certainly something to go for. Another question was, how much money should people take when they go to the US? Depends on what is your fee and how your fees are to be paid. And then that is how you would approach the quantum of money you need. Ms. Madonna had a question that are 3-year undergraduate degrees accepted by US universities? Well, that depends on what you want to study. If you want to study MBA, there are a lot of schools that will take a 3-year degree. If you want to study engineering, naturally you don't because you have a 3-year degree. But if you want to study computer science or biology or chemistry, then there are many more, fewer universities accepting that. But you can find enough, and generally you don't want to apply to more than 5 or 7 universities. So I think that can work. One had a question that is 315 competitive enough for TOPS computer science programs? Well, GRE is just one element, as we discussed. We don't have the AWA. You would need that there. Even academics is also very, very important. Then everybody who applies to top schools has a kind of 315 at least. So then what else you have done in terms of your resume, your recommendation letters would make a difference. So score alone does not get you admission. No. Mr. Sharif had a question that if professors are away on leave, does it make it a bad university? Certainly not. What universities do is they know well in advance that professors are supposed to inform well in advance that they're going to take leave, and so they reduce the class size. So if you notice, the university that you're speaking of, Mr. Sharif, is admitting many less people this year than it did in the last couple of years. So no, it's not bad. Mr. Suthar had a question. What is the financial aid? The aid is generally not available to international students. International students generally are not eligible for state or federal government aid. What you can do is you can get assistantships or scholarships, right? Someone had a question, which is an interesting question, has left the group, but can I take GRE in order to get into an MBA program? And since the last year and a half, the answer to that question is yes. Before that, that was not the answer. Uh, Sumita Bardhan had a question, but I don't see the question. Springtime begins in January. This is a question that Miss Madonna had. And, well, generally spring is January, but there are some universities that have a quarter system. In that case, winter is January and spring is more mid-March to early April. Oh, here's an interesting question. How do I find whether a program by Mr. Paranjape is STEM accredited? STEM is science, technology, engineering, and mathematics accredited. Well, you would write to the university and say that, will I get the 29-month OPT? Is this a STEM program or not? Should you take more insurance? I think in terms of insurance, more is better than less always. I think we have overreached our time, but let me just check for any last questions and then we can take it from there. Better Steve Nemo. Piyush Jain has an interesting question that would work experience matter in MS programs if it is relevant? So for example, if you were doing the working at, say, the Indian Institute of Sciences or IIT Mumbai or somewhere where you're doing research-based work experience, I think it certainly would add to your whatever it is you want to do. Some last questions and then we can. If an I-20 shows living expenses on the higher side, then what do you do? You have to show the finances for that, but you can always find out cheaper ways of living, not a problem. What is the minimum GRE score required for MS in electrical engineering from the top 10 universities? There is no minimum score. You have to be in the top 5% of the applicants to make it into that score. Into those schools, and then that alone is not enough. You need a lot more. I hope that was helpful and wish you all the very best in achieving what you want in your life. All the best now. Bye-bye.